Hey there, NASCAR fans. Have you got your copy of the latest edition of NASCAR Pole Position Print Magazine? If not, there's no better time than now to subscribe at polepositionmag.com. NASCAR Pole Position is the only print magazine covering NASCAR. Officially licensed by NASCAR, NASCAR Pole Position Magazine is published throughout the NASCAR season, and each edition is an instant collector's item, packed with great feature stories and photography. The magazine is even mailed to you in a poly bag for those who love to collect NASCAR memorabilia. At polepositionmag.com, you can even find past issues available to purchase. Get your subscription to NASCAR Pole Position and get great NASCAR content delivered straight to your mailbox throughout the season. Learn more at polepositionmag.com. That's polepositionmag.com.
Hey y'all, Rick Houston here, and I want to tell you about my new show, the Moonshine and Motorsports Racing Podcast. I've partnered up with the state of North Carolina Department of Natural and Cultural Resources to help uncover the history behind moonshining mountain boys, professional wheelmen, and the backwoods and city lights of the Tar Heel State. In the first episode, I sat down with Winston Kelly at the NASCAR Hall of Fame for a little behind-the-scenes gossip about Junior Johnson's engineering skills.
He's got two things in his hand, pipe wrench and channel lock pliers, and they weren't new. They had been around the block a time or two.
Wasn't the first steel they built, I bet.
No. I think the pliers had been red before, but paint had worn off.
And in the second episode, I talked to a professional hillbilly, a.k.a. Dr. Daniel Pierce of UNC Asheville, to find out the real history of moonshiners and their battles with the revenuers.
He wrote about one of his experience of trying to chase down this bootlegger in this souped up car, and he complained that the government gave him these piece of crap, cheapo cars, and that were really no match, but he thought he was doing pretty good, and then the guy just hits it and just takes off and practically disappear. But then the guy makes a bootleg turn and comes back towards him. And as he said, it was a game of chicken, and I was the chicken. And so he ran off the road. And actually, he was the guy who caught Junior Johnson at his daddy's steel when Junior got tangled up in a barbed wire fence.
So check out the Moonshine and Motorsports Racing Podcast, available on YouTube, dailydownforce.com, and all of your favorite podcasting platforms. And be sure to check out my regular show on NASCAR history, the Scene Vault Podcast.
Hello, folks. I'm Joshua Lepowski, and welcome into the next episode of Next Gen Creators, the Daily Downforce podcast, where we talk to the next generation of NASCAR content creators. Once again, I'm Joshua Lepowski. Thank you so much for joining us. Hey, make sure to head to the dailydownforce.com for some great daily NASCAR content, and be sure to follow us on social media at Daily Downforce on Twitter, at Daily Downforce on Instagram, and the Daily Downforce on Facebook as well. We're also on TikTok. Be sure to follow us on TikTok as well. And also, got any story ideas or any ideas for guests to come on to Next Gen Creators, be sure to message us on Twitter as well. Our DMs are open. Be sure to do that. And also, of course, dailydownforce.com for some great daily NASCAR content. We're on YouTube as well, so be sure to check that out for some YouTube videos and YouTube shorts as well. Today's guest on Next Gen Creators is David Land. David Land has made a name for himself, primarily doing a lot of IndyCar content on YouTube, but he's also done some NASCAR content as well. And without further ado, here is David Land on Next Gen Creators. And now it is time to welcome in David Land into Next Gen Creators. David, really happy to have you join us here today. So how are you doing here today?
First of all, I really appreciate you having me on. Yeah, I'm doing great. Trying to get back on the East Coast sleep schedule after spending a week in Las Vegas working at the Super Nationals for Kart Chaser. But yeah, I'm excited to be on. I appreciate the invite.
Yeah, that's really exciting. So, David, I guess we'll start way back at the beginning for you as a content creator. So, as many of you, or as many of our readers will probably know, you're not primarily a NASCAR guy. You primarily do a lot of IndyCar content, but you started out your YouTube career, as I looked back through your YouTube channel way back when I hit the oldest tab, saw a lot of Star Wars and a lot of gaming as well on there. I can see your face. You're definitely that's bringing back some memories for you. But if you can just start with what you started or what made you want to start doing content creation and kind of how your style as a content creator evolved over time.
Well, as you've just exposed, I've always been a bit of a dork, a nerd, a geek, what have you. Early on, I was always a creative type going through school. I was always interested in like creative writing, and trying to do, put the things that are in my head out into the world in some ways. So I would build like websites or do blogs, or eventually when this new creation called YouTube came around, I was very intrigued by it. And so I began to just make videos for fun. That was if you really go back in my archives of my channel, everything I did was just because I had created something and I was like, I would like the world to see this. It was never like I never had a strategy early on where it was like, oh yeah, I'm going to be this big, YouTuber. YouTuber wasn't even a thing in 2008 when I started my YouTube channel. It was just a place where you uploaded videos. Obviously, as the platform evolved, those opportunities presented themselves. But really, just when I was uploading the Star Wars stuff or something with Nerf guns or whatever, school projects. There's several school projects on there if you really want to see my dirtbag years. But it was really just a place to upload things that I just enjoyed and wanted to share with the rest of the world.
Yeah, that's really cool. So, you grew up a motorsports fan as well, particularly you grew up near the Indianapolis area. So obviously, the Indianapolis Motor Speedway is all over social media. It's all over your YouTube and that sort of stuff. And it's a place that, from the videos I've seen of you, it's a place that means a lot to you. And, you first were into IndyCar as a kid. So can you tell me kind of where your love for motorsports began and kind of how you began to expand into liking pretty much anything that has four wheels and an engine, and maybe two wheels in some instances?
Yeah, I mean, love's probably an understatement. I think obsession is probably the way I'd put it. But yeah, I've never not liked racing. As far as I can remember, it's been a part of my life. My family, as you mentioned, has always gone to the Indianapolis 500. It's always been just a thing that happened in May. And really it was, the 500 for me was a holiday occasion like Thanksgiving or Christmas, where you see your family, you mark it on your calendar as something, I know I'm going to see grandpa and I'm going to see Uncle On and all these people. And it was something that was so important to me from the very beginning, from a family perspective. And then as I began to grow up, you start to, really realize that you're, pushing around pennies and crayons around the kitchen table and doing racing. And, then you start watching, your dad's tapes. And then for me, when the Indy Racing League was formed in 1996, or at least when they ran their first season, my dad, somehow got to be the marketing manager at a paint company called Tnemec, and actually worked a sponsorship deal with a team in the Indy Racing League. So for a couple of years before he left that position, we'll put it that way, we were dad was going to the races every week, following the IndyCar schedule around. So there was so much in my life that influenced me very early on to be interested in racing. I mean, some of my first memories, I even have a home movie of me watching drag racing on ESPN in the 90s. Or, I can remember the 97 Daytona 500. There was a crash at the end of that race. I can remember the Laguna Seca Alex Zanardi pass at the end of 1996. That was really when my core memories started. The three wide run at Portland in the rain, in the kart race there. I mean, I can remember so many of these things so vividly that, it just makes sense that having that many core important memories to me, it's kind of a natural thing that racing would become a big part of my life.
Well, I love how you talk about how important that it is kind of for your or how big it is for your family, an event like the Indy 500 is. And that's something that sports really creates. I mean, I'll just say, I'm a big football fan. I'm a big Bears fan. I know you're a Colts fan too. So,
Wow. Who'd we beat in the Super Bowl
don't
that
talk
one
to me
year?
about 2006, David Land. I don't want to hear about that. Devin Hester returning that kickoff for a touchdown was the height of my Bears fandom. And
that scared me so badly because it was like, my God, don't kick the Hester. They kicked the Hester, and it's the first kickoff return in Super Bowl history. And at that point, as the Colts, we knew, like, this team chokes in the playoffs, and we finally get to the Super Bowl, and they immediately do the thing that everybody knew was coming, and they still just did it. And it's like, I don't know how they won that game.
And then we remembered Grex Grossman was our quarterback. That's what we remembered after that. But it's speaking back to my point, things like that, like sports for me, and it's a big way how I bond with my family as well, and how I bonded with my dad growing up and stuff like that. So it's interesting you talk about that, because those things can develop kind of as time goes on. But the fact that for you, the Indy 500, you call it a holiday. I mean, that's a really deep connection that you make, that you have with your family kind of in that early age. So, and does that tradition kind of continue with your family to this day at the Indianapolis 500, or is it different? Or
Oh, absolutely, it still does. It just has changed to me hosting everybody now at my house, which is very difficult, because what's funny is now, with the position that I'm in the sport, I'm not just the family man. And in fact, it's hard to manage, because it's almost like, you mentioned it being a holiday. I'm almost like the postal worker on Christmas. It is a holiday still. It's so important, and I love it so much, but it's also my job now to be there and to cover that race and do it to the best of my ability. And my relationship definitely has changed a little bit with it. But at the end of the day, when I'm done with my work in the morning at the Indianapolis 500, I could watch the race in the media center, and maybe I should, but I always end up walking to turn 3 and sitting with my family and watching that race, because at the end of the day, like you mentioned, it is a holiday to me, and I want to spend time with my family and watch that race the way I've always watched it, and hopefully we'll continue to watch it for years to come.
Have you missed an Indy 500 in person? Well, we'll not count 2020. That doesn't
okay,
count.
well, yeah, we'll throw that one out.
Yeah. Have you missed an Indy 500 in your lifetime, period?
Well, yes. I mean, I haven't. The first 500 I went to was 2002. Obviously, they weren't taking me as an infant, unfortunately, though my mom tells me that I watched the 95 500 as a baby when I was still living in Michigan. So I've always watched the 500. Obviously, it's tough when you live in Indianapolis. We moved from Michigan to Indianapolis, or Indiana, in 1995, late 1995. And so one of the weird things about living in Indiana, as you know, is that the Indy 500 is blacked out for the local market. And so we would always watch it when my family got home on the tape delay, which they still do, by the way, which is just, I can't believe they still do it. But so we would listen to the radio network. I'd sit in the kitchen when I wasn't going to the race with my mom, and we'd listen to the radio network call of it. And it's kind of one of those full circle things where now during the month of May, at times during practice, Mark Janes, the voice of the 500, who I still can't believe he does this, will sometimes invite me on for about 10, 20 minutes during a practice day and get up and be on the radio network as a guest, which I'm just, it's hard to believe that that's where my life is sometimes. And I don't try to think of it that way. But yeah, I guess technically I've never missed the Indy 500 if we're talking about just watching it. But since 2002, with the exception of the COVID race, I've been to every single one and don't plan on missing one anytime soon.
Let's give you a difficult question. What is your favorite Indy 500 that you've seen live?
So, it's funny. I think about this a lot because, I try to prepare myself for that question because I kind of understand that people are going to ask it. I think that for me, it takes, the the first one's always special, right? 2002. Just the fact that it's, you never forget your first time sort of thing. But I think the best, and another one that I really love was 06 with Sam Hornish and Marco at the end of that race. But I think the best one I've been to is probably 2021, because like you mentioned, we missed, most people in that facility missed the race. We're not able to be there. We had, Christmas in some ways didn't happen that year, right? We come back and it's this great duel, almost race long between Elio Castroneves and Alex Palou. And Elio wins his fourth Indianapolis 500, the first time that had happened since 1991. And it's Elio. And so, it's just a huge, it was catharsis, right? And so for me, that race being as good as it was, the crowd being as amped up as they were, the historic nature of it, at least for right now, 2021 is the favorite Indy 500 I've ever been to.
I remember watching that on TV at home. That was an epic race, I've got to say. And I actually was able to attend the 2019 500, which was also a really good race. You pointed at me. You mentioned
that's in my top 5 for sure. That's in my top 5. That one. That was a great race.
What people don't want to talk about is the fact that the first 130 laps of that race were not as good, but the last 15 laps were something to behold. But still, regardless, you've mentioned how passionate you are about IndyCar, the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, the Indy 500. But, obviously, Daily Downforce, we're a NASCAR network. So, I also would love to hear a bit about you and kind of your introduction to NASCAR, because you mentioned you were just a motorsports fan in general. You mentioned you saw the 1997 Daytona 500. I've seen you, I've seen you do like NASCAR diecast reviews and stuff like that. So you still grew up with a connection to NASCAR, and it was the biggest motorsport in the country, still is. So the connection is still there. What was kind of your connection with NASCAR growing up? Were you a fan watching every week? Were you kind of following it? What was kind of your relationship with it?
Oh, I'm a huge NASCAR fan. I mean, huge growing up. I had all the diecast. It was very easy to get all the merch, as you mentioned, because it was so big in that era. I was a big Dale Jarrett fan. For the longest time, I had a big, quality care RC car. There was a winter circle car in Walmart that I begged my mom for, daily. Every time I'd see it in Walmart, I need the quality care car. And I finally got it for my birthday, and I was so happy. And then as I got into school, I became a Jeff Gordon fan. And I had all the micro machines, NASCARs. In fact, I had the Indy cars as well. But yeah, those micro machines were very well loved. As you've seen, my NASCAR diecast collection was very well loved. I used to have big pack races with all of them. Jeff Gordon and Mark Martin and Dale Jarrett were always racing up front. And I slept on NASCAR bed sheets. I could go find them. I've got them in a closet somewhere in my house. NASCAR was a huge part of the auto racing scene, still is. And it was a huge part of my growing up. I mean, and what a great era to grow up in, for sure. That late 90s, early 2000s. It was a lot like kind of, maybe on a smaller scale, but what kind of going on in F1 right now, where you walk into the store and you see standees of Jeff Gordon and Dale Earnhardt and Ken Schrader and Tony Stewart. And then you could go buy their cars in the store, and there was all this merchandise. I mean, I remember the Mega Blocks, the Mega Blocks cars that you would build up, and I had all of those, and you could crash them and you could change the hoods, and there was so much fun to be had with NASCAR in that era. I had NASCAR 99 from Papyrus on my computer, and I ruined all the paint schemes because I made Jeff Gordon's car yellow for some reason. I have no idea. It caused the biggest crashes ever. There was a lot of fun to be had with NASCAR in that era growing up, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, that was the high watermark of NASCAR at that time, the late 90s, early 2000s, when NASCAR was truly kind of at its peak, and being that. So, I mean, my goodness, I mean, were you literally did you watch racing day or from sunup to sundown every Sunday growing up, being NASCAR, IndyCar, sports cars, anything? Like, is that what you did on Sunday afternoons growing up?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, I didn't have control of the remote a whole lot, but thankfully racing was on a whole lot. And I know whenever it was on, I was glued to the TV. I remember, I just have this memory of when we got direct TV and we didn't just have like basic channels anymore. And I remember the first two channels that we really watched. It was the Disney Channel. I remember seeing Winnie the Pooh. And then I remember Speed Vision. We turned it to Speed Vision and they were having plane racing. And I was like, there's a channel that broadcasts plane racing. It's like, wow, this is really cool. So yeah, I mean, I can just remember so much. I mean, the Rolex 24, I mean, that was appointment television every year. The Michigan 500 kart race, Talladega in the fall. I mean, there were so many big races that I would watch and just enjoy. I remember in 2001, there was an IRL race, I think at Atlanta, and there was actually a challenge going on at school. This is how obsessed I was with racing, that we couldn't watch TV for a week. It was like, if you don't watch TV for a week, you win some sort of prize. And the last day of that TV free for a week was the Atlanta IRL race. And I was like, I had the most difficult moral decision of my life, and I picked to watch the race. It was a good decision.
That's pretty incredible. And an understandable decision, by the way, too, I might add. I remember having those having that like turn off the TV week things at school.
Yes,
growing up,
that's
stuff
what
like
it was
that.
called.
Oh yeah, I had it. Oh yeah, I had it too growing up. Same, I had it too. I guess maybe it was just both of us growing up in Indiana. Maybe it was an Indiana thing. I don't know, but that's what we both did. So I mean, you mentioned just how obsessed you were with racing kind of growing up. So, tying it back into your content creation, when did the point come where you started marrying your love of racing into content creation more from a news perspective? And I believe from your channel that happened around the late 2010s ish or something like that.
Yes. The genesis of that was around the time where I was leaving high school and going into college, where I didn't have much direction in my life. I wasn't any kind of I wasn't doing any bad things. I just wasn't doing anything at all, if that makes sense. I didn't really know what I wanted. I knew in the back of my mind I always wanted to be was a race car driver, but we didn't really have all that much money, so that was never going to happen. And so I was like, well, what do I have to do to get into racing? Because I think I like it. I think I'm talented at it, but how do I make that my career? Because really, I don't see myself interested in anything else to the point where I want to make it a lifelong career. And so I just began doing a lot of thinking and like, what do I need to do? Well, I have this YouTube channel and at that era, we're talking 2011, 2012, 2013, you were starting to see creators start to rise up and begin to make careers out of things. And a lot of those creators were making careers from very specific niches. And I was like, well, hang on a second. I'm very proficient at a specific niche, which is auto racing. And so I began to take it more seriously. So I would do schedules of NASCAR Authentics reviews. I would do content at the Indianapolis 500 in May. I started doing gameplay videos specifically in racing on a schedule. And with the gameplay videos, when you're doing a 20% race in, let's say, NASCAR 15, for example, not every lap of that race is going to be exciting. So what did I have to do? Well, I had to think of something to talk about. And so oftentimes I would start talking about what was going on in the world of racing at the time. And I started to notice that the comments were like, wow, David, that was really insightful. I enjoyed listening to you talk about the current events in racing. And I said to myself, well, wait a second, what would happen? Hear me out. If I just cut the gameplay out of that and just did a video with me talking in front of a camera about what was going on in racing. And that's where it really started. And those videos started doing very well. And all of a sudden I'm like, well, I think I'm onto something here. This is starting to work. And obviously it's grown from there for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting. So within that niche, you mentioned specific niches. You have really cornered the market on one particular niche, and that is IndyCar, very specifically. So, what was it for you that made you want to? And of course, you cover NASCAR, you cover all motorsports, but you're still primarily do IndyCar content. That's really your, I guess, your flagship content, for lack of a better term. So what went into that decision for you to specifically talk about IndyCar on your channel, more so than focusing on NASCAR or even some of the other motorsports out there? Like, you've talked some F1, but F1's not in every video. You talk some IMSA, not in every video, that sort of stuff. What went into talking about IndyCar specifically?
Very simple. There was a gap in the market. It was very, very obvious to me that, you would read message boards or even the early days of Reddit, YouTube comments on IndyCar's own stuff. It was very obvious that there was a desire for a show or someone to create content outside of the TV broadcast. There were a couple of attempts. There was obviously segments on like the Speed Report or Wind Tunnel, but obviously when Speed Channel went away, all of that went away. So there was a market for it. And I saw that market and I said, you know what? I'm just going to start making videos about IndyCar and we're going to see what happens. I actually, believe it or not, and this is going to sound like it's not going to age very well, but I took some inspiration from iDubbbz on the first couple of IndyCar videos I did. Like, I looked at him, and this was 2017, 2018. He was kind of at the height, and I wasn't going to be vulgar, but I saw kind of his style, and I said, okay, you got to kind of walk up to that line of edginess. You kind of have to be a little bit, boisterous and rambunctious to get people to watch and pay attention to the serious things that you're saying. And so I kind of created this idea of what I wanted to try to do. And it seems to have worked in some ways. Certainly, yeah. It's hard to believe, again, just sitting here thinking about where I've come from and how I got there, to say that that's a very kind thing for you to say that I've cornered the market on IndyCar. But yeah, I mean, I will sometimes read topics about IndyCar and all of a sudden I will see my name pop up and, people will just talk about me and my connection to the sport, whether that's good, bad, or ugly, doesn't necessarily matter to me. It's just kind of amazing that it comes up in the same breath, frankly.
It is, and I'll be honest with you, David. Just to me, you were a large part of helping me. When I started really getting into IndyCar, like, I watched the Indy 500 growing up, not around Indianapolis, but in Indiana, being the most popular thing in the state. Like, I watched the Indy 500 every year. I loved it. But watching you helped educate me a lot in IndyCar when I started getting into IndyCar around the late 2010s was when I started. I think 2018 was the first season I sat down and tried to watch as many races as I could, which was a lot of fun. So, but you really have kind of put yourself in a position where, I mean, there's not a whole lot of people out there that are talking IndyCar. And I mean, not even looking at YouTube. I mean, you even look at just TV in general, like, IndyCar doesn't get the coverage that even NASCAR does. NASCAR has
even close.
I mean, NASCAR has a hour show dedicated on weeknights on Fox Sports 1. You're not getting that in IndyCar. So, I mean, because of that, it does put you on a bit of a more of a pedestal than some other people are that are in NASCAR that are creating content for NASCAR as well.
Yeah, that's an interesting way of looking at it. I keep having to tell myself this because it is difficult sometimes to be in the IndyCar space, because like you mentioned, if you're not the one creating content, it almost sometimes feels like no content's being created at all. With NASCAR or Formula One, those spaces are populated by enough major creators that there's always discussion, there's always talk, there's always something to talk about. IndyCar, it's difficult. It's really, really difficult with the lack of media coverage. But I have to tell myself all the time when I feel down about it and where IndyCar is and where I am in IndyCar, when that month of May rolls around, I really do feel where I am. And it's scary sometimes, but I said this on another podcast one time. You almost have to not be afraid of success. You can't be afraid that, oh snap, all the drivers know who I am in this sport, because these are guys I look up to. Still, I look up to them. And the fact that I was just saying this on a podcast I appeared on yesterday, when you walk up to Alex Palou, who is the best driver in this era, he is the current champion, and you walk up to him and he looks at you in the eye, stops what he's doing, and says, "Hi, David," and then we talk, and it's like, and he gives that respect to someone who's, at the end of the day, I'm just a guy. I'm just a guy on YouTube. Like, I don't have a peacock on my shirt. I don't work for a big magazine. I don't work for the local news. I am just David. I'm on YouTube and I'm just David. And the fact that the people in the sport recognize the effort that I put in and make me feel like a legitimate part of it. It's a massive credit to them, because I frankly would not be in the position that I am if the people in the sport didn't legitimize that position.
Well, and that's very true. And I've seen it, from afar, how the way that, the IndyCar community really has embraced you, and how, people have given you that sort of respect and things like that have helped you, kind of develop the following that you have, and, filling a niche on YouTube that, definitely there's a market for it. And that's really cool to see. So, despite you being primarily IndyCar, as I mentioned, you cover all motorsports, and that includes NASCAR, and, you have not shied away from the fact that you've made some very critical comments of NASCAR kind of in recent years, but, you've mentioned it. You said at the very beginning of the episode, not we're a huge NASCAR fan. You said you are a big NASCAR fan, and you give NASCAR its light of day. You were at the Indy road course race this past summer, and you covered that race. You still cover NASCAR and kind of give its light of day. So I guess I guess, could you give some insight into kind of like where a lot of your, I don't really know how to word this, but like where a lot of your criticism of NASCAR, it comes from a place of love, not a place of hate, if that makes sense. I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, 100%. There's a lot of things I hate in this world, and I don't make videos about them. There's a lot of things I can rant and rave about that I hate, that I don't make videos about, because number one, it wouldn't be productive, and number two, it wouldn't be entertaining. And I think that when I talk about NASCAR, or when I make a criticism about NASCAR, there's something that's very important to me when I do, and it's that I'm fair about it. That at the end of the day, as long as my criticisms are fair and there's justifiable reasons, and, there are some constructive criticism elements of that. I try not to just say this sucks. I try to say this sucks. Here's why. Here's what I would do to fix it. Anytime I criticize something, I don't just want to say this sucks, because anybody can do that. And I think that's kind of a secret to my success in terms of criticizing not just NASCAR, but any motorsport, is that I look 3 or 4 steps down the road and say, well, if they keep doing this, what is that going to lead to? What are the potential problems? What are the potential things that will go well with it? What would I do to kind of course correct those things? And here's how I see the ways to execute that. It's not just when I do a video that's critical, I really, really don't want it to be just crapping on someone, because that's not productive. I want my videos to be productive. And I think, you go back to that respect thing. I think that's why there is some industry respect for what I do, because, I think there are some people who brush me off as just some sort of a hater or a troll or whatever. But I think the people who really get it, the true racers, see what I'm trying to do, understand that, and respect that, even if they don't agree. And if everybody agreed with my content, I'm not doing my content right. That's the way I feel about it.
Well, yeah, that makes sense. And, you, as I said, you've been very critical about NASCAR over the years, but, a lot of your content, in a lot of ways, it does provide some education, and there's always it's it's always a good idea to make sure that you're looking at the other side of things to make sure that you understand whether or not you're doing things correctly. I mean, I remember, I don't remember exactly when you kind of first went down that road, but I think the first time I remember you kind of being very critical of NASCAR that I remember is after the 2018 Daytona 500, when you made that video. I remember that, and that sparked a big discussion on social media. And frankly, that's a discussion that continues to this very day. I think it does. I think of videos like that, and it's a discussion that's there to this very day. And there are a lot of people out there that, that feel a lot of the same ways that you do. And there is absolutely a place for that to be in the sport. And this is not coming from people that hate the sport. This is not coming from people that think NASCAR is terrible and needs to leave. This is coming from people that want to see NASCAR be as good as it possibly can be.
Yeah, 100%. And it's funny you mentioned that specific video because, at the time I got a lot of crap for that video, but like you say, as time has passed, that video continues to age very well. And I think, because again, I was looking down the road when I made that video. It wasn't just on, it's not just me screaming about the finish of the very specific finish of the 2018 Daytona 500. I'm saying, wait a second, guys, what's going to happen 5 years from now when we've seen 5 or 6 of these where the guy gets wrecked on the last lap? Well, guess what? We're kind of there now. But I mean, right now, it's funny you mentioned this. As of right now, I'm getting cooked on Twitter for pointing out that the F1 teams are changing their liveries too much. Well, guess what's going to happen? While those people are complaining that I'm complaining right now, they're not looking 5 or 6 years down the road when this is going to really wear out its welcome. Everybody's going to complain about it, and they're going to either change it back or everyone's just going to long for the good old days. And it's a cycle that I've noticed throughout my time doing this, is that a lot of people in racing don't look very far into the future. Again, you can disagree where that future may lie, but I think a lot of people just don't look far enough ahead for whatever reason. And that's probably the way it is in a lot of industries, but in this one especially, it feels like everybody is so locked into the present or the past that the future is just completely blind to everybody. And so it's kind of funny how those videos that I did 5 or 6 years ago keep coming up and people talk about them. Hopefully that Brickyard video that you shared will age well too.
We'll have to see. That was definitely that Brickyard video definitely rose some interesting, or it did give some interesting points to running a race at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway and stuff like that. So I guess I'll give you a bit of an opportunity for your platform here for a second regarding NASCAR, and just kind of pose the question to you, kind of like, what are some of the things about NASCAR today as you've seen NASCAR kind of make some changes in recent years? What are some of the things that you've liked to see NASCAR do in the recent years? And kind of what are some of the things that you haven't loved as much in recent years?
I really like that NASCAR is reaching out internationally. I don't think NASCAR should be an international series per se. I don't necessarily think they need a lot of races outside of the US. However, I think it's really cool what they did with Garage 56 at the 24 Hours of Le Mans this year. I thought that was extremely cool. I think there's an opportunity to see cars like that racing internationally. I think that would be very neat. I like seeing drivers crossing over and them being embraced, like Shane Van Gisbergen and Kamui Kobayashi and Kimi Räikkönen. I think that is extremely cool to see those guys come over and race against the Cup guys and sometimes beat the Cup guys. I think that always helps, special fun entries, whether they're different cars, different teams, different drivers coming in and filling out the field and competing with the best in NASCAR gives the world a lot of context about just how good NASCAR drivers and teams are. I think that I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly, that Hendrick Motorsports crew won the pit stop competition at Le Mans. They beat everybody with the Garage 56 car. So that just tells you how well prepared the teams are that compete here. So I think that that's a good thing that NASCAR is doing right now. I like the diversity in the schedule. I like the fact that they're trying new things. Now, do they always work? No, but I think that, and I was one of the skeptical people about the Chicago street race. But I don't think anyone after that race can deny that that was a great idea. Well executed. The track worked for the cars. All of it. I think that was all very good. I think there are some issues with NASCAR for sure. Is the next gen car perfect? Definitely not. Are there a lot of things to improve on there? Absolutely. I think that the schedule is still probably too many races. I don't know where you would make cuts, but I think the schedule is still too long. And the playoffs, that's another thing that we were all talking about years and years ago as being an issue. And it seems like the general population is starting to come around to the position that I was in about 2016. But yeah, I think something has to be done about the playoffs, because right now it would almost be like, always having the 8th seeds competing for the National Football League championship, right? I think that they have to do something to incentivize winning a little bit more, and also being a complete driver. Right now, you just have to be good at Phoenix. My suggestion, I don't have to put the professor uniform on for this one, but my suggestion has always been, if you're going to do a playoff format, once you get down to the final 4, it should be a competition over the last 4 races, not over one. And you should have a super speedway, you should have a road course, you should have a short track, and you should have an intermediate oval. And then I think you'll have a more complete winner. If you do a points race between those 4 drivers at those 4 circuits, then you've got a representation of the entire season in 4 races, rather than just one track, one moment in time, and one opportunity to win the championship. I think you're never going to be able to get rid of the playoffs, as much as I would like to go back to the Winston Cup format. I just don't think enough people who are powerful in the sport want that to happen. But I think there are ways to improve it where it will be a more legitimate way to determine a champion, and also give you that TV excitement.
Yeah, that all makes sense. And, there you go, David, with the opportunity to show some of what he loves and some of what he hates about modern NASCAR. So there you go. And so, kind of, and I talked a little bit about this with Darian, on the on an episode of this a few weeks ago. But kind of in spite of, and Eric a little bit too on the first episode of this, but like in spite of you having some hot takes regarding NASCAR, you have developed some pretty good relationships with some of these NASCAR content creators. I remember, I don't remember if it was 2021 or 2022 when NASCAR was at Indy, but you showed Darian and Eric around the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Museum. So, you have developed some relationships with some of these content creators. So how did a lot of those come about?
Well, we're all just in the same space, right? So we cross over quite a bit. We watch each other's content. We see each other on Twitter. And from my perspective, I think we're all one big community here on YouTube. I think we all stand to gain from helping each other out and providing opportunities to each other. And so that's why, and frankly, those creators, like you mentioned, Darian and Eric and so many of the other ones, they're good people. They're really good people, and they're fun to hang out with, and they're good friends of mine. They really are. And so from my perspective, I think it's great that we have a strong, tight-knit community, because we can help each other out. And on YouTube, that's why I was working with Kart Chaser this weekend as a pit reporter. They're doing some extremely cool stuff broadcasting go-kart races. And I think Xander Clements, who is running that, is doing such a good job. And that's why I go out there and work 14-hour days. Not because, I do like the money, but the main thing is I want to help this YouTube motorsports platform continue to be legitimized, continue to be a legitimate form as an outlet for auto racing. And so those, next gen creators, as you call them, I want to help them out, because in any way that I can, because it's important for us all to succeed, because right now we are Speed Channel. There is no Speed Channel. It's us who are providing that content. And so from my perspective, it's imperative that we stay around and we stay relevant.
We are a Speed Channel. I love that. I don't think I've ever heard it put better, how important that content creators are, because, Speed Channel hasn't been a thing for over a decade. I mean, I miss it. I mean, I miss coming home on Friday after school to watch a practice session or qualifying session at Las Vegas or wherever it was, but, regardless of that fact, you mentioned, because of something like that being gone, how important that content creators are and how important that it is that you support each other, even in spite of you both not having the same opinions. I mean, I know for a fact, you have not always agreed with what people like Darian or Eric or Jarrett the Iceberg, you haven't always agreed with what they've had to say. They haven't always agreed with what you've had to say, but there's a mutual respect there. And you all understand the bigger picture and how important that is.
And who doesn't love a good Twitter fight? That's the thing. As long as we keep it above the belt, who cares? It's entertainment. Our fans love it when we fight. So let's do it. As long as we are friends at the end of the day and we can DM each other and say, oh, isn't that funny how everybody's getting mad at what we're saying? It's all good. That's the thing for me is like, we as content creators, they don't have to make the racing product any more entertaining than it is, right? It's on us to make it entertaining for everybody else. So from my perspective, if it's us yakking at each other on Twitter and saying, oh, dude, you're an idiot, what are you talking about, sort of things, that is entertaining for people. That keeps the content, going. That keeps the discussion being driven. I mean, I think that's good for the sport. Again, as long as we are not, hitting below the belt and getting mean about it, I think it's fair game. Let's disagree. Let's argue. It's content. It's entertainment. That's what this is all about.
Absolutely. That's true. And, I mean, at the end of the day, if both sides are able to educate, are able to educate each other, educate the population, then that's a good thing, to understand the way that, you might think about something or someone else might think about something. That's always important, whenever you're talking about a discussion online.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Communication is one of the biggest and most important pillars of human existence. And it's amazing how few people understand how to communicate. And so I think seeing two sides of an argument is always the best way for someone to make an educated decision about their position on a discussion point. And so if I provide one side of it and someone like Eric provides the other side of it, truth is probably somewhere in the middle. And hopefully that's where most of our viewers find themselves.
Well, that's the dream, isn't it? Anytime that something like that happens, that doesn't always happen that easily, as you know. But,
no,
doesn't always, but still, that's what your goal is, and that's what your job is as a content creator. So, as you look kind of towards the future, David, of your content creation, you have been, involved in so many different things. What's kind of your ultimate goal or plan for your platform content creation, what you want to do in the future?
I think just push the medium forward. I think that right now we are all, as content creators in this space, we got under that closing door, right? Not everybody's going to slide under that door and get onto the other side on YouTube. And I think maybe that door is closing and there's going to be a certain amount of people who are the content creators that people go to. I think I've probably gotten under that door now. So now what I'm looking to do, I'm looking into the future, as I've mentioned a couple of times. I think the future of content creation in racing, it is a positive one, because as things move to the internet, as things move to streaming, as TV companies become more like what we are doing, I think we are in a very good position to start creating really, really high quality, professional level content. And that's what I'm working on right now. I can't say exactly everything that I'm working on or dreaming about, but I think there's some really good things that are going to start coming out on my channel. I'm not slowing down. I don't want to slow down. I don't want to take my foot off the gas pedal. I've got some great ideas. Just got to figure out how to execute them. But I think if you look at content creation as a whole, I think it's in a positive place. I think that as long as there's auto racing, there's going to be people that will want to talk about it. And in that sense, I think we've always got a place where people are going to want to hear what we have to say.
Well, I mean, and you all have a platform, nowadays, in this modern world, where, the internet, YouTube, that sort of stuff is so important. The platform is there. And, a lot of people, I mean, the first thing they think of when they see a big story is they'll look and they'll think, when you think IndyCar, people will think, what does David Land have to say? NASCAR, what does Eric have to say about this? What about Darren? Oh, what about Jared over here? What about all these people? What do they have to say about it? And, I mean, it's kind of getting to that point where, and it already is at that point where, I mean, you mentioned how the world is shifting kind of towards sort of what you're doing on YouTube. It's shifting more towards, streaming, direct to consumer, that sort of stuff, not turning on a channel at the right time on a Wednesday night to see if you can get your daily NASCAR news scoop, or whatever. You provide a lot of those things, and it's going to be interesting to see how that develops as time goes on. And it's interesting to see how a lot of times how we're seeing people take keys from YouTube and what you guys do into some of their own content, their professional content, if that makes sense.
Oh no, I'm well aware at this point that, it's very funny. So I know for a fact that at least at one point, NBC had looked at one of my videos and had taken something from it to do on their broadcast. And it's always interesting because those people in the very big chairs do pay attention to what we do, absolutely, for sure. And so when we do something that's successful, they do take notice. And that's something that I've kind of realized that I wouldn't have realized when I started making those Lego stop motions, right? Is that, you have to think about the racing community. And if you make a video that gets 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 100,000 views, everybody saw that. Everybody watched that video. Yes, that means everybody. And you just kind of have to come to terms with that and understand what that means. And it's cool, but it's also a lot of pressure. And I think in some ways, especially those bigger media companies, you mentioned it, I think they're starting to feel like they need to be competitive with what we're doing on YouTube. That's a great thing, and it's also a bad thing at the same time. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens over the next couple of years for sure.
Well, it will, absolutely. And it's going to be a lot of fun to see how people like you develop as time goes on. And, as motorsports develops and as, the media world itself develops over the next few years, I mean, we're going to be having totally different conversations in 2033 than we are in 2023.
Oh God, we're going to all have chips in our brains and you're going to be projecting a hologram of me in front of your face. Look forward to that in 2033, everybody.
That sounds like a lot of fun. So, David, we appreciate you so very much for coming on. Before you leave, just some final thoughts for us here.
Oh, geez, it was a lot of fun. It flew by, I'll tell you that. I appreciate you having me on. I hope everybody enjoyed listening. I think you asked some really great questions, and I think we had a pretty productive discussion.
That sounds good. A productive discussion. That's a good thing. That's gold in a gold mine right there. So once again, thank you so much, David. Once again, David Land on Next Gen Creators.